Species. One last time. From humans to dragon people to fox dog people to parasitic ghost spirits, we have had our fair share of run-ins with a ton of different kinds of beings. And since Hoyo is a company that takes attention to detail to the nth degree, each and every single one of them has lore. Some even have long documented histories that shape the universe as we know it today. And for some, there's only one remaining. Some species have their own customs and cultures that truly make them stand out as unique, while others lack any and all culture, and that is precisely what makes them so unique. And in this series, I have gone over 5 of the 8 major species we have run into on our trailblazing journey through the stars. Them being humans, Videodara, Intellitrons, Heliobifoxy, and Borisons, with the human category going over humans, Glamoth Iron Cavalry, Onis, Abjins, and Shanzhou natives. And today, it's time that we finish off this list by going over the culture, abilities, and notable unique features about the last 3 remaining species. Those being Memetic entities, Hovians, and Pepeshis. Not quite as tall of an order as the last video, but let's get into this. Because this is Honkai Star Rail in-game species explained. Okay, so starting off with what is probably the spiciest species on this entire list, we have the Memetic entities. And oh boy, these beings are complicated. So strap in, we're in for a wild ride. Memetic entities range from memory zone meme monsters that impale people for little to no reason, to birds, to cartoons, to people whose job it is to invade your privacy. And this is because they all share the same composition. Memetic entities are beings comprised of memories, ideas, and thoughts, and not necessarily having a physical body. Yet they can still interact with the physical world. Sometimes. Let me explain. You see, this depends on the kind of memetic entity we are dealing with here. So let's start with memory zone memes, shall we? These creatures spawned inside of memory zones like the Penacony dreamscape cannot leave said dreamscape and only exist within the confines of the dream world, not reality. But the confusing part is that they can be literally anything, from monsters to straight up people. Examples being Misha and quite possibly Gallagher. Misha along with Clocky being the creations of the late Watchmaker, and Gallagher being a Pathstrider of the Enigmata, who apparently ceased to be after Penacony ended. But in Enigmata fashion, we can never be sure. But these aren't the only kinds of memetic entities found in Penacony, no. Because if a person dies, their consciousness can be collected inside of a dream bubble and placed inside of the Penacony dreamscape, where this person can continue living. I put living in quotations here because eventually their spirit does fade with time and eventually dissolves. We know this because of the Trees at Peace quest with Chadwick and the more IPC human rights violations. Long story short, this genius named Chadwick created a weapon so dangerous it had the potential to destroy 24 planets with a single blast, and the IPC forced him at gunpoint to fire it at populated planets as a test run, and it worked too well. And unable to deal with the Oppenheimer level of guilt from the millions of lives he had a hand in ending, he stole vital secrets from the weapon plans and ran away. But the IPC tracked him down and put him under house arrest, and interrogated him for the secrets he stole for the rest of his life. But it doesn't stop there, because as he lay dying, they siphoned out his consciousness and placed it inside of a memory bubble, then kept him on life support for centuries, all while continuing to interrogate him even after death. Now, remember last video when I said Skrullum almost started a war with Penacony? This is why. They wouldn't even let a fellow member of the Genius Society have access to the memory bubble, until Skrullum started flexing and they crumbled under the pressure. Fun fact, we end up taking the memory bubble back to Herda's space station, where Chadwick bestows the entirety of his research to Madame Herda, secrets included. So now Herda can blow up planets whenever she feels like it, and has probably already figured out a way to counter the imaginary implosion pulse. That's the name of the weapon. And as to why she has the means of housing memory bubbles, we'll get to that later. back to memetic entities. Drop the whole video about that story so you can go watch that if you want to know more. But yes, Chadwick in this deceased memory bubble state classifies as a memetic entity since there were only his thoughts, ideas, and consciousness in there. You see how that's different from memory zone memes and cartoons? They don't die unless everyone forgets about them, but spirit memetic entities eventually fade. But this is where it gets complicated because memetic entities are also memo keepers, memo snatchers, and cremators, all of which fall under remembrance memetic entities, as I'm going to call them, because they all kind of fall under the Aeon of Remembrance Fu Li. You see, they all work towards the same purpose and are created in the same way, but they kind of all do different stuff. A remembrance kind of memetic entity is a person who has been transformed into a memetic entity by Fu Li upon their own request. And due to this transformation, they gain multiple abilities. One is to traverse through space, visiting foreign worlds as they please. Another is the fact that they can turn themselves invisible as well as collect, steal, and delete memories at will. They also gain access to the Garden of Recollection, a pocket dimension of sorts that Fu Li keeps their stored memories in. And it is how said memetic entities interact with the Garden of Recollection that determines what they are. A memo keeper, like Black Swan, dedicates her existence to simply collecting memories. A memo snatcher steals memories without the consent of the individual, and a cremator deletes memories that they find unimportant from the Garden of Recollection. Now, you might look at the abilities these guys have and instantly be concerned for anyone attracting the attention of one. However, in order to become a remembrance memetic entity, they are trained rigorously on how to use their abilities and to never overstep and break their rules. Because if they do, they are met with immediate termination. Unless they are a memo snatcher, because they are radical members of the garden and are an exception to the rules apparently. We don't exactly know why yet, but for some reason they are allowed to just steal memories at their own risk. But do not get me wrong, these guys are very powerful. So powerful, in fact, that Welt classifies memo keepers as emanators. Though I would use the term pseudo-emanators since Fu Li did transform their body, but they didn't necessarily receive Fu Li's power. At least not directly. Which only makes Herta's feat of trapping a memo snatcher even more impressive, because her mirrors that allow her to see Emphorius teleport around and duplicate herself indicates that she has mastered the path of remembrance to such an extent that a being comprised of memories occupying a body made by the Aeon of Remembrance cannot even escape her. Again, these guys can turn invisible and even incorporeal. Herta has also snatched memories from a memo snatcher as an emanator of erudition. Not only is she absolutely abusing this poor thing, but she is abusing her with her own power. Something that a memo snatcher should be unrivaled at. Think of it this way. What Herta did to this memo snatcher is like what Rupert 1 did to organic life forms. Rupert understood how the brain worked to such an extent that he learned how to hack it. And Herta understands memories to such an extent that she can collect, steal, and trap them while making herself invisible and intangible. More proof of Herta's mastery over the remembrance is the fact that she was again able to contain a memory bubble in her space station. Memory bubbles along with light cones are creations of the remembrance, by the way, and Herta gives us light cones. She's been in this for a long time. That aside, memo keepers having no physical body means that they are extremely vulnerable to memetic viruses. We've seen this in Mr. Rekka, who was threatened into submission by Professor Preeman. The reason why memetic viruses are so lethal is the fact that it warps the memories of the person it infects and shapes their perception of things. Now, to normal people this isn't so bad, and it is sometimes even temporary, but to a memetic entity this virus would infect all that they are. As memories themselves, they can't handle a virus that is aimed at corrupting memories. But this isn't their only weakness, because as we've seen through Acheron, the nihility is the fear of all memetic entities, because the power of the nihility has the potential to straight up delete memories, and it is the only path that is able to do so. Even the destruction leaves memories behind, but not the nihility. This path is also the antithesis of the common saying among memo keepers being memories are eternal, which should be memories are eternal sometimes when Blobby Boy isn't involved. And in terms of philosophy, they don't believe in the present, which is very, very strange. They only believe in the past and what has yet to become the past. Black Swan said that recently. Very strange. But yeah, when they're not facing someone way out of their depth, they're really strong. And that's just about everything we know about memetic entities, so let's move on to the most angelic and long-awaited species on this list, the illustrious Hovians. Known for their unique tiny wings on their back of their heads and the halos over their heads and sometimes behind it, Hovians are a species with a natural aptitude for the power of the harmony. And this makes a lot of sense because Hovians are naturally charismatic and loved by everyone. Basically everything the Avgens aren't. Because instead of being stigmatized, Hovians are revered almost purely because of their appearance. Which is ironic because Avgens are hated just because their eyes are pretty. And as ironic as that is, they aren't very different from humans at all, at least not that we currently know of. Their head wings are basically useless. I know, I'm disappointed too. However, their halos are where things get interesting, because they are condensed energy projections from their psyche and are not tangible. And every Hovian's halo is different because when they are born, they are a simple circle and it evolves and changes as they grow up depending on their personalities and life experiences. This is also why Sunday and Robin's halos are completely different and are placed in different spots. Fun fact, even though you can't touch their halos since they aren't physical, for whatever reason the Memoria in the Dreamscape turns their halos physical, allowing the Hovian and whoever to interact with them, meaning that they can adjust the way they float over their heads and even throw them like a frisbee, though it's not stated how far it can go. Consistent with their theme of psychic-type mind powers, Hovians have an innate telepathic power that they can use to read the minds of people, as well as change a person's state of mind. Robin refers to this power as tuning. While the range of this ability isn't too impressive at around 6 to 10 feet away, it is multi-purpose and can even be used for simple communication. And by multi-purpose, I mean how Robin uses it to make people relax and Sunday nearly killed Aventurine with it. Personally, I believe this ability is the reason why they are connected to the harmony. You know, the whole telepathic mind link thing just sounds right up Sheepay's alley. And that is just about everything we know about Hovians. I feel like we're gonna learn more about these guys in the future compared to the other species. The info about them feels a bit scarce. Maybe our journeys with Sunday will eventually reveal more about them. Anyway, moving on to our last species on this massive list of ours, we have the Pepeshi. And while not much is known about them either, I feel like they hold a secret that is yet to be addressed. Interestingly enough, they are the only species that is stated to be indigenous to Penacony. They are naturally very intelligent, business-minded individuals that have no business living as long as they do. They also have a heightened sense of smell for whatever reason. Despite their short stature, they often manage to climb to the top of corporate ladders wherever they go from sheer force of will alone. Their only notable difference from normal humans being the fluff ball on their heads that is kinda like a tail because its movements indicate their emotional state. Darting back and forth indicates anger, with twirling indicating rage, drooping being sadness, and vigorous swirling being excitement. Something you wouldn't really know in the slightest because in game they never move, which I feel like they should. It would really make them stand out more. Anyway, even though their dandelion-looking fluffball head tail looks inviting, touching it is apparently a very intimate and sensitive gesture. And remember when I said they have no business living as long as they do? Well, in truth, their lifespans are incredibly inconsistent, because they aren't considered a long-life species, but for whatever reason, Old Odie is apparently over 10 Amber Eras old, which could be anywhere between 760 to 2,400 years old. So yeah, Old Odie is very old. Okay, so this is where things get a little bit spicy for our little Pepeshi people, because I think one of them might just be one of the pseudo-emanators of the preservation, or in other words, one of the IPC cornerstones. Namely, Opal, a P46 ranked member of the Strategic Investment Department, sharing the same rank as Jade. And since we know Pepeshis are naturally business-oriented individuals, this makes all the sense, since he is also short, and again, Pepeshis are known for climbing corporate ladders. So this is a perfect fit for Pepeshi. The only minor detail being that we can't see the fluff ball on his head since it is hidden under his hat, which also makes perfect sense because if its involuntary movements indicate his mood, smooth, this would be a glaring disadvantage when cutting deals and ruin all hope for any type of poker face. So this is all but confirmed in my opinion. And that concludes our 3-part series on the 8 major species of Honkai Star Rail. Admittedly, there are a ton of others, but we either haven't run into them yet, or they are classified as more animal than sentient person. I hope you guys enjoyed this deep dive because this took a ton of research and reading, but once again, we don't do things the easy way on this channel. And I don't think anyone has given this aspect of the game's lore the attention it deserves, because it is really fascinating and really provides some added details that really spice up the events in the story, like understanding the extent to how badly Herta styled on this memo snatcher, or the intense contrast between a Hovian born into respect and adoration and an Avgin born a pariah, both being mostly human with key aspects that make their lives entirely different from the get-go. One with his schemes forever concealed, crossed with another who can read minds. Doesn't this interaction just feel different and way more special now? It sure does to me. The Penacony story was so deep, and as we keep learning new things, it only ages like fine wine. And that is what I love about this game. It's the layered lore that makes this all so intriguing to me. But what do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.